Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 3rd, 2024.
I'll second.
Leaves the motion and Tim's the second. Anybody have any changes, corrections? Anything on the minutes?
I have none.
None. Fantastic job.
Everybody's good? All those in favor of approving the minutes as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Citizens' comments. If there was someone here that would like to address the board regarding an issue that is not on the agenda, now would be the time to do so. Are there any citizens' comments? Next item is old business. Julie, can you take us through our old business list?
I can, not a whole lot. The housing feasibility study, we have made an award. There was only one bidder, but normally we would not like that, except that the one bidder is SE Group. They are the same organization that came and did our master plan and also did the wayfinding plan and have done a lot of work for Chester, and we have thoroughly enjoyed working with them. We get great products, so we have no issues agreeing to use them. So SE Group will be doing the feasibility study for the town and working with the Housing Commission on that. Just to let you know, paving projects for this year have gone out to bid. We've got them all back. We have a new company going to be doing the work, Fuller Construction out of, I believe, Londonderry. We'll be doing all the projects. Everything came in below estimated cost, which is great. That will be Andover Road, the parking lot at Cobley, and the area for the pickleball court at the rec facility. So we're doing pavement instead of concrete because it's significantly cheaper. The grants, just so that you guys both are, that you all are aware, the congressionally directed spending opportunities that came up. So we had applied under Sanders. Mike had done the application for the community health initiative to see if we could get any funding under that. That was under the Sanders appropriation, but we also, I was contacted by Peter Welch's office, and they asked about our sewer project. They'd heard about our sewer project and strongly recommended that I submit an application. I've never had that happen, so I submitted the application. I don't know that it'll get us anywhere, but I submitted the whole $2.3 million project, so we'll see. But just so that you all are aware that those were submitted on behalf of the town. The tree projects, again, just most of the select board is aware, but you know, you're going to see various tree removals throughout town. Some have already happened. This is all part of that urban and community forest grant that we received. There is a group that is working on kind of the placement of the plantings, working with property owners, et cetera. So you'll see, we'll keep you updated, but you will see work happening throughout town, and we're going to try to be very public and advertise the process, just so that you're aware of that. And ARPA funds, we need to obligate ARPA funds by December 31st. So at one of your upcoming meetings here, probably in May, we'll have a discussion, start having a discussion about the remainder of those funds. I'll get you exact numbers on what's left. I think it's a little over 300,000, and we can start having discussions about what the board would like to do, or where the direction you'd like to head with the remainder of those funds. So that will be coming in May. And that's it.
Anybody have anything else for old business?
Just speaking of the SC Group, where do we stand on the wayfinding?
So they're being constructed now.
Okay.
They, as soon as, I would imagine probably in May, we'll start seeing those installed.
Okay.
But they are being manufactured now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What color did they end up being?
They ended up being that beautiful kind of a slate gray. Well, slate blue, I should say. It's a kind of a darker blue is what the group a long time ago we kind of decided, like 2 years ago.
Just curious.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
It went back and forth between that blue and the green, and we all kind of had decided the green just blends in, and it's been done. You know, Grafton has, like, everybody has green. So we went with the blue.
Any other old business? Nothing? Heather Chase has joined us. She's our state representative, and she's here to give us a little legislative update. Heather?
I don't think my camera's working. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, good. It's nice to see you all. I just, right now it's crazy up here, really having long, days and weeks. The crossover was about 4 weeks ago, I think, don't quote me. And that's where all the bills that the House is working on goes to the Senate, and the Senate have all the bills coming over to the House. And we're really in a place where there's nothing that's for sure, because once it gets out of committee in the House, goes to the floor, is passed, goes to the Senate, then it goes through committee again. So a lot of things are changing, and there's not a lot of certainty at this moment in time. So I thought I'd join the call to just let you know. One of the bills that Julie and I have talked about is the ethics bill. 51-page bill that passed the House, went to the Senate. When it was in the House, Ted Brady from the League did a lot of testimony, got some things changed that towns were concerned about. Now it's in the Senate, and I believe it was either Tuesday or last Thursday that the Senate took it up in committee. So that's up in the air, but it's of interest, and I'll be following that and letting y'all know how that pans out. S16, the e-cigarettes and vaping bill, was passed in the House, went to the Senate, passed, the governors vetoed it. So that's, I'm not sure they're the votes to override that. That bill, in my opinion, was flawed, but, you know, and they piled a lot of different things on it. But the good thing about it was there's a lot of vaping going on in high schools, and the American or the pediatricians did a lot of testimony that was pretty shocking about what they're seeing in their practices. So that was interesting. In my committee last year, we worked on a right to repair bill that looked at logging equipment and farming equipment, that farmers and loggers would have the right to repair their own equipment. And that passed, and I understand it may be coming out of the Senate and passing. That's the rumor. All this is rumor and conjecture. So just FYI. The other big bill that we've been working on is 121, the privacy law that I think will make a lot of difference to a lot of people's lives in Vermont. And that's currently in the Senate, and just a lot of different things are going on. But that would be the framework if it passes as it is or similar to what it was. It will be the framework on which we'll be working on AI legislation going forward. Those are the things, the top things that just came to mind. But remember, there's over 1,200 bills going back and forth, so just a lot of activity. Some people have been up in the State House recently from Chester, and it's been good to see people. And if you guys have questions or want me to investigate certain bills and where they're at, I'm more than happy to do that. In May, when I come, if you guys still want me to come, hopefully we'll be able to come in person, and, you know, give a synopsis of some of the big things that actually have passed the House and the Senate. So right now it's just way up in the air. Everything.
Heather,
So, yeah?
Thank you, thank you for the update, and appreciate hearing from you. I don't mean to blindside you by this. This is Lee, by the way.
Yeah, I
But-
recognize your voice.
I got an email from Vermont League of Cities and Towns about the H687, the Act 250 bill, and I know we're going
Yeah.
to talk to our senators about this, because I guess they're looking at it, but wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that bill relative to preemptions to zoning, municipal zoning, and how we should think about this.
Well, two things. I could talk to you about the tiers and where Chester may end up. It's my understanding, oh my God, Lee, now I'm going way, I haven't seen this in a few weeks, but I think we'd be one tier, one something, and that would mean that if we had our own zoning,
Well,
we would not have to engage with Act 250 with certain projects. And what I can do, because that's being changed, and by the way, the yield bill passed today. That's the the how to pay for schools and all that. That changed today, was passed out of committee today, but it's been redone every single day for the last week, and the Act 251 is a little bit like that.
Okay.
So what I could suggest is maybe in May, if that's the one you want me to just focus on, I could give a 10-15 minute presentation on what actually passes.
yeah, I'm going to reach
If
out.
you like.
I'm going to reach out to Senators McCormick and White relative to what the thinking is behind this, because it seems like it's going to take away some of our authority relative to zoning and housing and a few other things. So I appreciate that it's changing rapidly. You may not have up-to-date information about it, but I just thought I'd ask in case you could shed some light on the why.
I understood it as Chester would be in a better position with smaller projects not needing to engage with Act 250. That's how I understood it.
Okay,
Whereas towns that do not have a zoning plan or any plans would have more restriction. So they need to still go to Act 250. But and that's my understanding of it from 2-3 weeks ago.
right, okay,
But and it is in the Senate now, and Becca and I were talking about it. I'm not sure if it was this week or last week, and so she's really on top of that too. So maybe we could invite Becca to come talk to us too, but we'll know more shortly, because I'm thinking that they're honing in on how they're tweaking it too.
okay. Thank you.
But I think Chester, how I understood it, is going to be in a better place with less restrictions versus more restrictions, because of all the work we've done in the last, 10 years or something on all of our planning and our zoning and everything.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Does anybody else have any other questions? I had a quick one, Heather. On the, there's some bill going through that's going to be affecting the local towns, the ethics bill. Does that thing have any?
Yeah,
Does that thing have any teeth to it, or is it just aspirational?
well,
Changed.
it's 51 pages, and it's I viewed it, and Arnie, when I first got on the select board 9 years ago, we started the conflict of interest policy. And so basically, from the town's perspective, how I saw it was, if towns didn't have a code of conduct or a conflict of interest policy, they needed to adopt one. So we were good with that part of it. There were some things that Ted Brady didn't like that Julie and I have talked about that I can't remember. And there was also more on the state level. If you're running for state office, you have to, I think, disclose if you have any monies of $25,000 or more in like Apple stock or something. You don't have to say how much money you have, but you do have to disclose if you have, shares in a local housing project or something like that. So I think statewide it was a real positive thing. Your question was, does it have a lot of teeth? I think it was just kind of preliminary and not a lot, but like I said, it was 51 pages, and it's changed a lot, and now it's in the Senate. So we'll see. I'm sorry to be so to not 100% know that, Arnie, but I can get all that information, and I think Ted was fairly happy with the negotiations with the committee, is my understanding. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, and I'll be up at VLCT tomorrow. I'll get an update on where it stands from their perspective.
Well, it sounds
Yeah,
like
and I think he was in the Senate. I think he was in the Senate, Julie, recently.
Yes, he was. Yep, he was. My understanding is it's changed significantly from the way it started. The way it started was really
Right.
scary. My understanding is where it sits now is something that the league is a little more comfortable with, but
Yeah,
I'll get an
yeah.
update.
And to be really honest, I think it's okay for us to have some ethical guidelines for towns to work within, and for people who run for state office, i.e., me. It's okay for us to have people know more about where we are and have more transparency with those sorts of things. So I didn't think it was a heavy lift for anyone. That's my impression of it.
Well, Heather, thanks for the update, and I appreciate you spending time with us. It's always helpful to hear from our legislative folks up in Montpelier, and it sounds like it's a crazy time with everything changing and everything that's going on. So maybe next time it'll be a little more concrete when they start passing some of those 1,200 bills. Wow.
Yeah, like there was close to 1,000 in the House. So a lot of times when people email me or call, just FYI, and they say 186, like today someone wanted to know about that, and 186 was last year, Woo! So I have a good memory maybe, but not that good. So, a lot of times I just have to understand the Ledge website and find out where things are. I'm more than happy to do that. 350, I think, bills out of the Senate. So it's just, at the top of my fingers, sometimes I don't have all the information. But if you guys want to talk to Julie in the next few weeks, and hopefully the second meeting maybe in May, I can come back and just really let you know what happened to 3 to 5 bills of interest for you. The Act 251, we may need a consultant to come in and talk to us about it, because I think that's 178 pages or something, or it was, right? So they get pretty complex, but I know a lot of folks that will be willing to come in. And the ethics bill, the rep who really stewarded that through the whole process, she even said she'd jump on a call if you guys want to know the granular level about that. But I figured we should wait until we know where things are at before we get into that kind of level. But I'm more than happy. If I can answer the questions, I can dig and find people who do know. So.
Thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. Keeping track of 1,200 bills would be quite the task, because the next thing on our agenda is our short-term rental thing, which I've been struggling with one bill for quite a while, and hopefully we'll get through this one. But Heather, thanks again for the update and the information. It's always
Okay, guys, and I miss y'all. I can't wait to come to the May meeting in person.
Sure. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Heather.
Thank you.
Okay, bye, guys.
See you later.
Next item on our agenda is our town ordinance, our one ordinance, not 1,200. It's our short-term rental, the STR ordinance, and it came back from the attorney. And as you go through the pages and you've looked at what's happening in there, there's quite a bit of redlining and suggestions and comments. And I guess it's our job to try to figure out where we want to go from this point. And how do we want to proceed with some of the suggestions and comments and red lines and changes that the attorney has suggested. These are an attorney's view on a document like this, making sure that he's covered all the bases and everything that possibly could happen. As far as being, I guess a lot of it would be if it was challenged in court, and I guess there's a lot of examples of that going on. None of it seems like it's happening in Vermont at this point. I think Burlington might be the only place where there is some kind of a legal challenge going on, and I'm sure there's a few other places in the rest of the country. But a lot of the times when he mentions some of the issues, it hasn't been challenged yet, and it seems like it will probably be coming up in the future as ordinances get passed and things change and things happen. I guess we can go through this.
I was going to recommend that we go through Jim's letter and just look at that and see
Where it corresponds to what's
yeah,
going on.
Yeah, and then if we need to get into the weeds, we can, but it seems like, of the 7 points that he makes, we can look at what his recommendation is for each one of those and then decide if we have to do something else within the ordinance itself. Because there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of red line strikeouts in that document, trying to make sense of it. Could be challenging to us.
And in my skimming both documents, it does appear that the letter correlates to all the redlining point by point.
Right.
So the only issue would be if we left anything off that was on the red line, but I think his letter covers all of it.
So if we start out with, well, to go down the bullet points, and number one, some of them are pretty straightforward and relatively easy to deal with. The annual registration application and administrative work that might be extra because of it, but it's on an annual basis as opposed to ours starts at April 1st. And he was recommending that we follow the annual calendar that's applied by the state. And I imagine that would be an easy one. And Preston Bistro's here, our zoning administrator, to help us out with some of this. Preston, he says it's an easy one to deal with. No problem on that one?
I mean, yeah, it's relatively easy. I mean, sure.
Sure.
Obviously, we keep getting people saying, why am I paying a full amount and I'm not getting it for a whole year and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, we could get through it somehow. Yep.
How hard would it be to prorate? Because we don't even know when we're going to have this take effect at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we got people renewing now $300 a pop, and so if we were to implement this next year, I mean, we could possibly reduce next year's fee as a prorate, but we're also thinking about doubling the fee too. So I mean, I guess it's just, no, I don't see this as that hard, other than the fact that I just have to make the comment that whenever you change things, there's always going to be some people that are griping about why you're changing things, that's all.
So relative to the annual registration and then actually issuing a certificate, you don't see any issue with that?
No, because we issue a certificate anyway.
Right.
He just wants it, he wants it clearer.
He wants it,
clearer.
oh, okay,
And so he made certain edits in there. I have no problem with those.
okay.
So that covers the first two of them, which are basically just administrative paperwork and stuff. The third one is sewer capacity. And I guess he's just clarifying on the date and whose authority that we're going by.
You know, the amusing thing is the bylaw we have now, he reviewed. So he's now saying, oh, those wordings are great, and he'd already reviewed it. But no, there's no problem. He just prefers some reference to an amnesty date and that kind of thing, but it's all the same thing, it's no different. So that's not a problem.
Emergency contact was an interesting one, because that's the one that was based on Windham County or geographical area, where he's saying we should be more arbitrary and choose a miles a miles distance from where the short-term rental is, as opposed to which county is. I didn't quite understand that one.
Well, it sounded to me like, rather than saying you have to be within these two counties, you have to be within a certain distance of town, which I found a tool online where you put in whatever the number is, it draws a circle. And so 100 miles basically is all of New England.
Too big.
And some of New York, yeah. 50 miles is actually probably a better, it gets into northwestern Massachusetts, New Hampshire, a little bit in New York, but I agree that it should be probably related to a distance, and whether or not, I guess the question I have is, what's the purpose of this? Is it to have somebody able to respond to a crisis or whatever it is?
And I
so
think that was the
50
safety
miles,
thing.
yeah, 50 miles is going to be an hour to two, depending on what road you travel.
I can tell you what the purpose was, and that is that in the event we have to enforce these, we have to be able to serve enforcement, and so we just were saying we have relations with sheriffs in those two counties. And if the contact is in those two counties, it makes it easy. If you're having to serve process on somebody in another state, you kind of have to hire some kind of a firm, you know, Dog the Bounty Hunter or something, I don't know. And so it was just, I'm making light. It was just made sense to us to work with two sheriff's departments that we know. If our attorney says doesn't work, but that's really all that provision is for, is serving enforcement.
So I agree, I think it makes sense to
Yeah.
do that. I guess the question is, excuse me, how do we enforce that? You know, is that something that we have any teeth? Like, we don't issue a permit?
Well, and this is where Chief Tom Williams, sitting behind me, might be able to say something. Our enforcement here is using a municipal ticket, and it's the very same ticket that he fills out when you have a speeding violation. But of course, when you have a speeding violation, you serve it right to the person sitting in the car.
Right.
And so, as a for instance, municipal tickets don't succeed unless you have a driver's license on the ticket. So we've asked for driver's licenses. One of the things Jim says, well, you can't provide, you know, security that people can't request those driver's licenses. That's true. I don't know any other way around that. And that's what other municipalities do, because that's the only way you can enforce a municipal ticket. So anyway, I guess I guess I'll just say that I personally am registered as an enforcement officer with the Judicial Bureau. I have a ticket book. I have not used it yet. I have talked to other zoning administrators who say that the Municipal Bureau throws out tickets by municipalities all the time because they're lacking very basic information, and they say that ticket has to be filled out completely, or they'll just dismiss it. Does that sound right to you, Tom? Yeah, Tom is saying yes. Have you had experience with tickets being thrown out because you didn't?
Well, Tom, if you could,
Yeah.
there's another microphone up there.
Tom Williams, Police Chief. I've seen other tickets dismissed for an abundance of different reasons. There is something in, I think it's in the statute, that allows for clerical errors. I don't know if leaving something blank is a clerical error, but if you can't get a piece of information, you can't get it. But there's got to be at least enough identifiable information so that you're ticketing the right person. It doesn't get mixed up and go to somebody else. You know, if I say a Joe Smith, probably a fairly common name, but I don't have a date of birth, that might create a problem, and they may dismiss it for that.
So yes, we do ask those intrusive things in our application. We do ask for their date of birth, we do ask for their driver's license, and you're supposed to know if they're in active military service. Not too many are, but I've heard tickets getting thrown out for that if you can't
They do.
demonstrate that.
So the idea of having that 100 mile puts us in a different states, and it makes it a lot harder to do anything.
I think it would, yeah. I think it would make it harder, because if we have, if we have somebody that lives in, Hoboken, New Jersey, that rents a rental up here, it's kind of, we have to figure out a way to serve papers on them, that's all.
So, getting back to the enforcement aspect of this, if we send somebody a ticket and they don't respond, then I guess the next recourse would be don't issue a permit next time. Or can we revoke the permit?
Good question to ask, I'm not sure. I mean, we can certainly not renew a permit, absolutely.
Right, yeah. And that, I guess would be our.
And that is one way to look at it. If it's an annual ticket, yeah, we could certainly just refuse to renew it because they're not
Yeah.
being truthful. Yeah, that's true.
This is Kathy Hasberg. Wouldn't that, if they don't register and they continue to rent, then you're still issuing tickets, right? That's all we can do.
The most common violation is when they're actually renting and not registered, that's true. But then we really don't have all that information.
That, the 100-mile radius, I'm almost more inclined to stay with what we had as far as the two,
I agree.
know,
I think
I mean,
going with the 2 counties makes sense.
50 miles is, even the 100, or any of those, and you end up, where do you draw the line? When you have 2 counties, if the address is in those 2 counties, it's pretty easy to figure out and pretty easy to deal with. And I don't think it's going to come up that much anyways, because they're talking about the person that would be contacted in case of an emergency, and usually that's going to be the case because the person lives so far away, so he has to designate someone that's going to be close. And it's,
I'm pretty, I've always been of the belief that lawyers are called counselors because they're supposed to provide counsel. They're not the decision makers. I do think that probably what I envision coming from this meeting is that you'll give us direction, but we'll follow up with Jim. And I mean, if Jim says, oh no, this is really important, that's one thing. Or if he says, hey, look, it was some advice I gave you, but if you do something different, it's okay. So we'll find that out.
take it or leave it kind
So
of thing.
while we're on that topic, I played around with the radius as well. And I thought if we're going to do a radius, 30 miles probably makes sense because that covers Brattleboro, Rutland, Woodstock. It actually goes into New Hampshire, West Leb as well. And then, of course, some of western New Hampshire. But it's a lot more reasonable than 100 for sure. And even 50 takes you out of the state a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what's tough with a circle is you pinpoint the STR and you draw your little circle. Is it in it? Is it out of it? Is it close? Is it not?
Well, the way
Whereas if
it's-
you have counties, it's in there or
The way
not.
it's worded, though, is from the border of the town, from the nearest border.
From the border.
Yeah,
I'm happy to just stick with the 2 counties that are
I'm fine
referenced.
with that as well.
Consensus? Just stick
Yeah.
with it?
Yeah.
Stick with the way it's written. Yes.
The waiting period. Most of this seemed like it was dealing with hosted and unhosted, because it sounded like he brought up that dormant commerce thing again. And it says basically that if we do it that way, we're discriminating against a certain group of people. I'm not sure how to go with this. You can argue it both ways, because there are things in this state that apply differently in the way of taxes, in the way of other things, you know, fees that are associated with whether you're a resident or non-resident. And the dormant commerce clause, for some reason, it's popping into a lot of what's going on, because they're considering this commerce. Somebody's making money at it. So the laws of this clause have to be applied here. There's different examples that are in here, and we're going to have to decide whether we want to stay with this or all group them all together and just keep it all the same, and the rules and regulations would be the same for whether it was hosted or non-hosted. Because it comes up again regarding the difference between hosted and unhosted. It's not just this part, I think. Regarding the caps, and regarding, this one's talking about residency requirements, rental ordinances, face discrimination. And I think the next one's kind of the same thing, because it talks about the cap stuff.
Well, the thing that comes to my mind is that we were trying to give some relief to hosted, owners who live in town who are hosting their short-term rental, and not require them to jump through the same hoops as somebody who is a non-hosting unit. So how do we do that? If we're applying this to everybody, then kind of that benefit goes out the window, and then we're not necessarily fighting for the rights of our citizens, our constituents. But I totally understand that we don't want to be the guinea pigs for another lawsuit.
Well, that's the data. Preston, you said that what came in, because the amnesty has been listed, we really haven't been snowed with a lot of people who are dying to have Airbnbs. So why, see, in my mind, when I look at that, why would we want to set us up to pay more lawyers' fees? We've certainly helped Jim out this year.
Well, to take that comment, but more specifically, even in his comments to us, the fact that he can reference 4 or 5 different cases in 2 or 3 different states would indicate that this is a trigger type of regulation. So to read between the lines of his recommendation, it does feel like there's a whole lot of ways to dissect this particular piece of the puzzle if we're not incredibly careful, which feels like he's saying we can't even do that. But just, there's a whole lot of references to ways they can pull this apart.
And it's basically, for these 2 parts, it's the waiting time before you could have it, and the caps, because they apply differently to the 2 different groups. So we either don't have those or apply it to everyone. I don't, if we're not going to do it the way we were doing it, that seems like those are the options that we would have then.
We don't have a big rush of people that are doing this.
No.
You had 2. Why? I mean, we don't have to have the liability. We're still going to know if a bunch of people come, Preston is going to tell us and say, wow, we had a huge jump. Then we're going to know. So we just back off from this, and, if there ends up being a jump, Preston's going to tell us. We're going to have the data. We're paying someone to collect the data, so we'll know.
Yeah.
But the question, Peter, is what do we do about it if we do get a huge jump? Is that what we want, or are we trying to maintain the status quo, if you will?
Well, you maintain the status quo till you see what the jump is, because the state of Vermont will do something sooner or later. I'm sure in
Yeah,
their
well-
1,000 bills.
We got 1,200 laws coming up
Glad
and they
Heather's
ain't
not
doing
on the
it.
line anymore, but I don't trust the state any further than I could throw it.
Right.
Because, based on past history, I don't think they're looking out for our interests, and that's why we're here.
Well, we know that because they're getting the extra rooms at meals tax, and we're not.
Yeah.
Agreed. But we're not seeing a big jump. You know, we have time to look and see and think about it and let somebody else go first. If all these cases are here, you know, let Burlington go through the legal system and then see what happens there.
So does anybody know how other municipalities are dealing with this?
Everybody is kind of in this same, where do we go? Tiptoeing around, getting legal opinions that are probably very similar from what Jim told me yesterday.
Yeah, my comment to Jim has been, other towns are doing this, but his comment back is, when somebody decides to sue, they're going to swipe every town that's doing it, and you might be one of them. So it's a lawyer warning us.
So it feels like the options are to scrap the waiting period or apply it to everyone, right?
That's for waiting and caps.
Okay, so as I think about this, it seems like the reason we're not getting, this is speculation, a lot of applications right now is the real estate market is not at all what it was 2 years ago, when we were getting a lot of people coming in because interest rates were low, people were looking for a way to buy that retirement home or vacation home or business home that they turn into a business. If interest rates change again, which, there's pressure on that to happen, we could get caught between a rock and a hard place because we can't change this ordinance.
Yeah, we can.
Not quickly, we can't.
We can
So how long has it taken us to get to this point today? And hold on a minute.
Yep.
And if we adopt this tonight, which I don't know if we were even ready to do that, it doesn't feel like we are, it takes 60 days before it takes effect. So that's a big window to me that people could come in and we could be seeing a repeat of what we saw in 2021 and 2022. And I don't think that's desirable for the community.
But we could still keep the caps, we just have to apply it for everyone.
That's what I'm advocating.
And just make sure that number is enough that if there's people that want to do, we have a little buffer, and that gives us a little ceiling, that if we hit that ceiling, we have to rethink this. It gives us a little bit of a guardrail on it, as opposed to having none at all or having two separate ones.
That's for the cap.
That's the cap part. And the same thing for the waiting. If we're allowed to still have that waiting period, but we have to apply it evenly, whether it's hosted or non-hosted. That's the impression I got from this. Because it's that commerce thing, and you can't discriminate against a group of people that are involved in the same business that these group of people are.
How many do we have right now, Preston? Do we know of?
55, yeah,
55.
50 together, both?
together, both, yeah,
And our cap was what, 60 or?
yeah.
60?
But the 60 was only of
Unhosted.
unhosted, and since about a third of them are hosted, I keep looking at Kathy because she knows the numbers better, we thought we had a fair bit of room.
But we could change that 60
And we can
to
change that
70
60,
to give it
yeah.
a little buffer, so we don't have to address this again, and that would be 15 new short-term rentals, and if we use up those 15 spots, then maybe it's worth it to open up a conversation again, but.
Well, then that's potentially, and I know we're wrestling, we talk mostly about safety and that with this, but there's also an underlying issue of housing.
Yeah.
That the town's spending a lot of energy on trying to solve, and allowing 15 more full-time residences to become short-term rentals is going the wrong direction. We talked last meeting about 5 more places coming off the grand list due to
Flood.
FEMA buyouts. So from that perspective, I would caution against extending the number of the cap. And I would advocate for applying the waiting period to all, since we can't split it.
What's the consensus of the board on this one?
I struggle with the waiting period, having had a month to consider the comments of citizens who were here whenever it was the last time we heard from a lot of people on this. Both Jim's commentary on the waiting period and having attended to what we were told, I struggle a little bit with applying the waiting period to everybody. The waiting period to me was appealing if someone was genuinely coming in and saying, I'm buying a house to make it a business. But by applying it to everyone, then all those stories and anecdotes we've heard about folks who can't quite afford to move into town, so they're going to open up a room and things like that, I struggle with the waiting period being applied to both unhosted and hosted.
And how about as far as the numbers go?
I would advocate to increase the quote number and keep the cap in there, because the cap does feel to me like it addresses the, what if all of a sudden thousands of people want to come and buy houses in Chester? The cap is really our only defense against that, if that were to happen.
So I have another question about enforcement. So what happens if we do what Jim is recommending here? How do we enforce, or is there a way that we can reject an application because it's an annual registration process? Can we reject anybody without having some reason to do so? Or is that going to open us up to a lawsuit as well?
That one sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, is like,
If
no
you don't
matter
have
what
a
we do,
reason,
we're
then-
kind of stuck.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
Well, there clearly has to be a reason to reject somebody. You can't just say, I don't like you. I mean, that never works. So what we're kind of saying, I mean, the most obvious reason is failing to register, but then that's another story. I think of it a little bit analogous to you issuing liquor licenses, is that if you get lots of reports of disorderly conduct, you tell them, look, either shape up or we're not going to reissue your license. And I think it could be analogous to that.
So then, we talked a little bit about a lottery system, and
Yeah.
would that solve this problem?
I don't care for a lottery system simply because the people who had made investments in their houses to do a short-term rental, to have you not have the certainty of knowing from year to year whether you can rent or not, just feels very unattractive to me. That's where the cap, where once you're in, you got security, you know you're in, seems fairer.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just, trying to think through this whole process in reference to what Ariana said. It's like, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with either one of these being just relating to everybody.
Could we maybe make Evan Parks, could we maybe make a provision for people who are trying to stay in their building by renting a short-term rental? Because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people whose only real option is the short-term rental to stay in their property,
Yeah, and if there was an easy way to do that, which is what we were kind of trying to do with hosted and unhosted, because if you're trying to stay in your property, you're hosted, you're there, you want to be part of the community. But the two avenues that we were going to pursue to accomplish that, I guess we're not exactly on legal ground to do that.
It's very easy to see the tension. We sitting here talking about people in Chester want to benefit people in Chester. If you're thinking the nation, you're thinking citizens should be treated equally, and that's the problem, is that he's citing federal law saying, you're a citizen, you're a citizen.
Excuse me, Preston. I don't know if your microphone is off or what, but I'm having difficulty hearing you.
I guess it was. Sorry.
Thank you.
Not quite sure whether I was saving the battery or I pushed it by mistake. But anyway, I was, just for your sake, I'll report it again that the laws of the nation say a citizen's a citizen, and therefore, even though we in a very well-meaning way, you in a very well-meaning way, is saying let's help the folks who actually live here in town to pay their taxes, it's just not how federal law looks at it. And unless there's some other way we can peel that apple, I don't know.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV and don't want to, but if, to me, an unhosted Airbnb, or a short-term rental, rather, is a business, not a residence. And it feels like legally, there should be a way to create a clear separation between those two things. I live in my home, I have an accessory dwelling unit or a couple of spare bedrooms, and I want to rent it out. Versus I live somewhere else and I buy a home and I want to just rent it out as a business. Businesses are regulated.
Which goes back to one of the options that we were talking about in the very beginning of this, whether those goals that we're trying to accomplish would have been more legal or easier to do through zoning and classifying it as a business and making that distinction, because that's part of it we were talking about in the beginning, but we figured that if we could do it through an ordinance, we were going to stay with it that way. But I don't know if that would change things if we went through zoning. I know that's a whole different can of worms, and it's a whole different direction to go, but I'm just curious about what that answer would be if it was zoning that controlled this. But
And then when I say I'm living in my building, but I have a long-term and a short-term rental in my building, what does that mean? Right, is that,
If you
Is
live
that a
in your
business?
building, then
Right.
it's hosted.
right, okay. But I mean, as a business, you know what I mean? Would the building be a business
But
then?
it's not
Am
solely
I
a
renting
business.
for myself, you know?
no, we don't classify any of the apartments in town as a business per se, but they do follow zoning regulations on like, how big the units could be, how many people, how many apartments you could have, and I mean, that's part of what's going on now with.
These are all
laws
things
that are
that we can ask Jim, and I appreciate, Tim, you're looking at it, thoughtfully, but at the zoning level, we haven't said that a home occupation or a home business is different whether you live there full-time or part-time. We haven't made that distinction.
Still,
I can kind of see the logic of saying if you don't live there, then it's not a residence, it's a commercial, but we might have to explore that legal concept, because I don't think that's how we do it now. It's not how I've ever been taught to think as a zoning administrator.
Well, even if you took it to zoning, though, you don't really have a limit on the numbers. You're just making a hurdle to go through, but there's no number limit.
True.
Well, then you could regulate them differently.
But that doesn't change the numbers. You still are not able to change a number. If you allow it to be a use, even if it's a conditional use, you can't say you can't have that use, you can only put conditions on it. So somebody can easily just flip that over. So you actually have more control with the ordinance than you would from zoning.
So can we do both?
Can't we do both?
Can we, was the question.
It's,
So if the residence then becomes a business, under whatever definition that is, then this ordinance applies differently to that business than it does to a home.
I think you're into a whole big legal can of worms that I
Well, this
don't
whole
think we
thing
need
is
to.
that.
Well, no, we have a clean ordinance right now that works, and we don't have significant numbers. So I don't think we should step in the hole to set ourselves up for legal stuff. If we can watch the data and we know what can come, yes. With anybody expecting a pandemic to come, that was kind of out of the ordinary. We have a really good ordinance. The only thing that really needs to be changed is the fire inspection on everything. That definitely has to happen.
Yeah, that was we all agreed on that.
You
And
want no? Uh-oh, we're seeing no at the other end.
No, they're not going to do that right now.
They're not going to do it now? That was the answer
There's
when we
not
got back?
staffing. There's not staffing.
That's not happening.
well,
They would like to.
It kind of means making 45 inspections, and I guess they're just feeling that they don't have that ability to do that right now.
My understanding is that it is a staffing issue, and it just, because if they do it, I mean, that's statewide. I mean, and that's not, my understanding is that that's not what the law is. It's, they do inspections for 8 and above, or above 8.
But if I have, see, this goes back to.
I mean, if
question of-
Chester were to bring in their own inspector, that's something different.
Right.
Well, one bright spot is that we had where is here? A limit on how many units any one person can own, and Jim didn't have a problem with that.
You can have commerce, but not too much. How about if we go with this, the cap's at 60, we go with 65, put that in there and keep the 1 year waiting and just keep it hosted and unhosted for now until we have some more information or any other questions that we would have.
I mean, in theory, many people who already live in town, the 1 year doesn't apply because they already live in town. It would only be somebody who came from out of state who said, I am going to live there full-time, and we'd say, well, sorry, you still got to wait a year.
Or if you bought a house, you live in town, you bought a house, and you bought a different house and you moved, then your year would work.
And
But
there are
that's-
people who have brought that scenario up, yes.
Edmund, you wanted to?
I just want to say that my plan personally is that my sisters are going to get the building when my mother passes, and then I will be living in that building, but they both live out of state. And the plan is to rent out one to a long-term and have a short-term rental. So is that an unhosted? Am I there managing? I'm not sure how that works.
That's a little gray area there in between.
Right, but that's my plan, so I'd be curious. yeah.
You're a designated person to contact and everything, so you'll be fine.
We know
And-
some good attorneys.
And is a unit a bedroom or a building or an apartment, or what is the definition?
It can be any of those, it's whatever you apply for.
So if I have a building with 4 apartments, is that one unit? If I rent them all out?
Sounds like
Each
4.
apartment would be a.
Each apartment would be a unit if you rent them,
It's what
list
you're
them
renting.
If I
separately.
got 2 apartments with 3 bedrooms each.
Then that would be,
2 units with.
you'd apply for 2 units with 3 bedrooms each. It's how you advertise it on your
Oh, I see. So if I rent those
Airbnb.
bedrooms out to different people on the same day,
Yeah,
that would be 2 different units, right?
Still, sounds
'Cause-
like.
Yeah.
Because people might want to be flexible with that.
yeah.
I would talk to the customer, I don't know if they'd go for that.
Again, it's how you're advertising. How are you advertising it
All right.
for rental? So what are you doing? So have you decided what you're doing? Sorry.
And I kind of thought the natural ownership was cool, but Jim was a little skeptical of that, too. Natural person, I meant,
That's-
yeah.
Oh, that's a whole different one.
Jim don't like that.
The only, I just want to point out in Jim's recommendations, or his counsel, regarding both the cap and the waiting period, while he does say that the core issue is that we need to combine both, has to be hosted and unhosted, I do think that the counsel is that we're setting ourselves up for litigation regardless. So I just want to make sure, he doesn't say, if you apply it to both, you're fine. He says one of the issues is this, but the other is just the general issue. So at least that's what I'm
It's still
seeing.
an issue.
All right,
Yeah,
and the
that's
last-
all, I'm just pointing that
The
out.
last sentence of number 5.
Yeah.
Given the potential for a challenge on dormant commerce clause grounds, I would consider making the waiting period applicable to all short-term rentals of dwelling units.
Right.
So there he is saying that he feels
Just
that that
make
is
it
fine.
everything.
Yep.
Yep, and again, he's concluding the same thing.
He also addresses the zoning in paragraph
Yep.
6.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no restrictions.
So that would seem to imply that that would be potentially a direction to go, but I guess we decided we're not going to do that
At this time, no.
That was a discussion we had
early.
5-6 months ago when we were first looking at what direction we were going to travel in. And I don't see us pulling a U-turn at this point, but, so we'll go with a cap and the waiting period?
Applicable to both? Applicable to all short-term rentals?
I mean, that's the big thing, that it's applicable to everybody.
And And just remind me, this evening, are we sending this back somewhere, or are we, okay?
No, we're not going to vote on it. There's
No,
too
it's got to get
much.
cleaned up
It's
then.
too messy.
I wouldn't know what to vote on.
No, it's got to get cleaned up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would envision that we would take your comments, clean it up, send it back to Jim, say, is this what you really were saying was okay? And then we'll be ready.
So the last thing is that natural person.
He does not like that.
He does not. No, that's the impression I got, that was not
Our
going to be
visual,
in
our
there.
verbal conversation was no.
So,
I would have to agree that if we're doing enough, if we're doing
Yeah.
as many things that are potentially going to cause trouble, why add yet
why
another
have
one?
it? I mean, if you got a limit of 2 units already, I can't see that some
Yeah.
giant corporation is going to come in here and complain that, oh my God, I'm not a natural person or
No, it
whatever
would have been
that
a fun thing to get on the
discrimination is.
I think the waiting period helps with the investor aspect of it as well.
All right, so I think that's it. Anybody else have any other questions or concerns on the rest of it?
I will say very briefly that after our bad experience of last year, that the firm we're working with now is, at least their website, Kathy has found it to be enormously easier to use. I don't know if you want to say anything or.
So I looked at the website this week. It said we have 115 short-term rentals in Chester. And that would have taken me like 4 or 5 hours to get through under Granicus. And I 2 or 3 today. A lot of the 115 are.
Kathy, you must have hit the button, sorry.
It blinks out by itself,
It's red. Does it run out batteries?
but it may be running out.
All right. So it's a lot easier to use. It's a lot quicker. It's easy to show this person has rented 17 times in January and things like that. So we've got a good product now that makes it easier to manage.
You just said there are 115?
It listed 115. 30 of them have never, they don't have any rental history. They are not open for rental now.
Just went off again.
They're not.
Yeah, you're off again.
When you look at their calendar, they are all not renting. So I don't know exactly why they were listing all those. I need to ask them, No, well, the company gets information from Airbnb, from the advertising agencies. And so it's not that they track the money or something, but they conclude from what the calendars on the website say about this property or that property, that it's being rented or it's not being rented because it's closed. And that's the kind of information you can get quickly.
I think it's simply that there are a lot of listings that are dormant, that's all.
So how many so when I asked you earlier how many we have, you were citing registrations?
Yeah,
Not,
Well,
Because that's what we have.
but we believe that's, I mean.
We have
We
55
believe that's the number that
registrations.
there are. The others aren't active.
this year,
I
2
think-
or
I
3
think
are
Kathy was
sold.
just trying to say,
Yeah.
you get this massive data.
Right.
And then you subtract out multiple listings at different hosting platforms. You subtract out the hotels and the motels and the lodging establishments.
right.
And then you subtract out people that listed in the past but are dormant now. And then
Yeah.
you get to who's actually listing.
so there aren't
actively.
really 70 that we don't know about?
Right.
Okay.
I would like to assure you that there's not 70 that we don't know about.
I'm hoping that you can do that.
And Sean keeps us informed about ones we don't know about, so, yeah. He
black-
does that for free.
The black market of STRs. All right, so you kind of know our direction.
Yep. We'll modify, get it back to Jim.
See what happens.
See what happens.
Take it from there.
Yep.
Next item on our agenda is our Community Health Initiative. And Julie, can you give us a little brief history on this? I know we have all our chiefs here to help us out with this once we start talking about it, but a little background on it?
Yes. So I know we've mentioned this a few times in the past, talking about, starting it at the advanced EMT level, taking a community health approach, something that is being done across the country, actually. This is an initiative you guys had initially approved last year. So Chief Ranzio is here. He's going to give a little bit of an update on kind of the work that has been done. The direction that this initiative is kind of heading. The ask for tonight for this section is beginning this process of taking this to the next level, which is adding the position of a paramedic. It is not the addition of another position. It is Chief Ranzio becoming a paramedic. So we're not creating another position within ambulance. The reason that we would be looking for this ask now is that training is a year long. So the school opens in September. Chief Ranzio was willing to use his GI Bill from the Army to pay for that paramedic training for himself. So he would not be completed that training until the end of '25. We're not going to send him to paramedic school if the select board is completely against having a paramedic on staff. We want to make sure that you're in agreement with that movement forward. If we have a paramedic, we need to use them as a paramedic once he's done. So the true community health initiatives that are happening across the country that are being proven successful are initiatives that are at the paramedic level or equivalent to a community nurse. Municipalities that don't have ambulance services existing tend to go the community nurse approach. We already have an ambulance. It's way more cost effective for us to just advance one of our staff to a paramedic level, and then for the community health initiative, things are equal at that point, as far as what we are providing. So Mike can go into a little more detail on some of that. I have put in your memo a lot of the benefits that we've been talking about, for the past year that we've brought up. Again, Chief Ranzio can go into more detail on that. And then the second part of this that kind of funds the asks is the addition of the transport service. As you all know, we were approved to purchase an ambulance. That ambulance will be coming in late summer, early fall. We would like to keep the ambulance that we have and run a 1 to 2 year pilot program on running a transport service. The research that we have done and Chief Ranzio has done is where ambulances are getting closer to self-sustaining through the use of a transport service. That's where the revenue tends to come in. We would operate that transport service, again, using our old ambulance and other staff. So at all times, if that transport is out doing, if that ambulance is out doing a transport, Chester is still staffed. So we're not taking an ambulance out of service, I guess, is an important thing to note. That revenue, in the budget that I gave you guys, that revenue is really what kind of makes everything flow nicely together, and is exactly what other ambulance services are doing throughout the country, actually. And hospitals are in real need. That is an area that, we've gotten called several times, can you do a transfer? We can't, because we can't take our ambulance out of service. But there are plenty of opportunities for transports, and that is where hospitals are having a need. But I will shut up. I will let Chief Ranzio, I could talk all day about it, so I will let Chief Ranzio give you more explicit details of the inner workings, how it works, the things we've done, and the direction that he would like to take this in.
Mike Ranzio, Chief of Chester Ambulance. So I think the easiest thing will be just to kind of go through the PowerPoint, see what community health is, what we've done, and kind of where we're going from then. They'll probably generate some questions. Next slide. So mobile integrated healthcare or community paramedicine, it focuses on a patient-centered model. It's more proactive versus reactive. EMS has been for a very long time. You call 911 when there's an emergency. We come pick you up, bring you to the hospital. The whole point of this is to better take care of our community, being in that proactive setting, and actually building better connections with all of our health partners so the patients have a better outcome. Next slide. So what we've done today. Last year, I focused a lot on training and kind of starting to build some connections. So today, we have 45 individuals trained in Stop the Bleed. We have 54 that have been trained in first aid, CPR, and AED, 15 certified as Vermont Emergency First Responders. 5 individuals have been assisted with navigating the healthcare system, that being, it could be a visit, a phone call that we receive, kind of, what am I supposed to do? Who do I reach out to for this? And we kind of just help point them in a direction. 2 individuals that we've assisted with Life Alert and mobility devices. Those mobility devices we got through either donations or we found some connections. Tom is very good at finding those. We have an upcoming EMT class, which we will hopefully be bringing 3 more EMTs onto the service, as well as bringing in some revenue from training other individuals. We've also developed a really close relationship with the police department through this. So as Tom works or Chief Williams works on community policing, we kind of are falling in line with community health. And on May 2nd, we have a community outreach event. So our goal is to kind of show to the community what the different organizations are out there and what's available to them. There's so many out there, I can't even keep track of all of them. So how are community members supposed to know that? So we're going to bring them all here. We have the hospital, we have North Star Health Center, Bayada, Senior Solutions, and then Neighborhood Connections. They'll be coming here and it'll be a panel discussion of kind of who we are, what we do, and what's available to you, and answering any questions to community members. Next slide. So where we want to go. Right now we are licensed at the advanced EMT level. The next level up will be the paramedic level. That comes with a little bit more medications. It's the highest level of pre-hospital care that we can potentially provide. It's definitely, I think, personally a benefit. We're not calling Springfield or other mutual aid partners when we need that paramedic. We will have that available here in Chester. Training for community care paramedics. So there is a International Board of Specialty Certifications for community paramedicine. The training runs around roughly $5,000, and it's a 3-year certification, if I'm correct. Then the inter-facility transfers. That is kind of what we've looked at as helping our health partners, but also how do we offset all this cost. Everything we've been looking at, everything we've been trying to do is, okay, we want to do this. Well, how do we bring up the other line so we're not hitting the taxpayers as hard? And through all of this, we want to provide, care transitions. As people are leaving the hospital, being discharged, we want to make sure it's smooth. As they get home, they have someone that they can reach out to. They're being checked up on. It could be a Friday. They may not have an appointment with their primary, mid next week. Well, what happens during that time? I have questions. I need something looked at, but it's the weekend. Chronic disease support. There's a lot out there. I think I saw a statistic recently that about 45% of Americans have diabetes. The whole point is that we can then come in and assist. It could be whether it's checking the blood sugar or even guiding them of how to take the medication, making sure they're taking the right dose of that medication. Wound care as people have surgery, kind of changing those dressings, monitoring, making sure that there's no infection and getting ahead of it before it becomes a rampant infection. The basic vital signs monitoring, blood pressure checks, medication reviews as they leave the hospital. They may get some new medications, need a little guidance of setting up whether they take in the morning, afternoon, what not to take it with. And then home safety evaluations. I think I talked about this before, but let's say they fall a lot, let's move the shag carpet out of the way so we don't keep coming back when you fall and hurting yourself. Next slide. So how do we fund this? We have had a very busy beginning year of grant hunting. So we've applied for SAFER and AFG, both federal grants. The three of us, myself and Chief Whalen and Julie, have worked on it. So SAFER is staffing. So we kind of changed the wording a little bit that second full-time person would be a firefighter as well. And Julie the conversation will move towards that later. But, we're trying to cover that staffing expense, and that can cover up to 3 years potentially. AFG to cover some of that equipment. If we go to 2 ambulances, the one thing I am missing is a cardiac monitor to get that second ambulance going. It comes in about $40,000. And then congressional delegation funds, so we did put in this whole program. I think we said it was a 3-year pilot. Yep, so we put in everything to fund this for 3 years. We'll see if it works. But something we could rely on for sure is the interfacility transfers. Typically, they are not like emergent transfers. It's Springfield Hospital may have a patient, they need to go to Dartmouth. They have a bed open at 5 o'clock. Can you be here around 4 to pick up the patient from Springfield, go to Dartmouth? These pay pretty well because we bill at $22 a mile, and there's a flat rate as well. But we can get potentially, anywhere within the state. There's a lot of interest, at least with the department. I did a survey with the department about who would be actually interested. About 70% said that, we can do it with our current staffing. Everyone agreed that it is beneficial and there's an interest in doing it. Me and Julie have looked at it, how do we make sure that we can actually do this? So there would be some financial incentive for the members to participate in interfacility transfers. It's a little less chaotic because we can kind of have an idea of when they're coming. The problem is right now we don't have a whole lot of ambulances in the area, so there's a whole lot of business that we can tap into with this. I was just speaking with Olga Carey. She's the interim nurse manager at the ED. There's patients waiting 2 days to get shipped out. And sometimes they lose their bed, so they're even waiting longer. There's little things that, little trips, from like Springfield to the Wyndham Center that we could do and make a little bit of revenue. And we're not using really any equipment or expenses because it's get on the stretcher and drop you off, in a simple term. We are looking at long-term funding through partnerships. Me and Julie had a meeting with the CEO of North Star, some people from Springfield Hospital, the executive director of Senior Solutions, and we pitched this idea. What do you think of this? We had a great conversation back and forth. And everyone seems to be on board, and there's interest in kind of moving this to the next stage. And they're all aware that there's a cost share that will have to come up at some point. But the interest is there, and we'll continue having those meetings to kind of figure out that long-term funding. Again, Julie said that for the paramedic education, I would cover that cost. And again, we're looking at a paramedic level probably winter of 2025, early 2026. Increased expenses, the medications are probably around $10,000. That's a very, very rough estimate. I won't know until we actually go through a year. That's the biggest thing that changes besides some minor things. So kind of as an example, let's assume 100 transfers between Springfield Hospital and Dartmouth Hitchcock. Insurance is reimbursed at different rates, so we kind of picked a number, 70 kind of stuck. But if we got 70% of reimbursement as what we billed, 100 transfers can generate about $80,000 in revenue. So, and that's after expenses. So even with adding up to a paramedic level, that's overall we're saving $47,000, even with more services offered. And a lot of this, again, we've been preaching public safety. So this revenue is not just ambulance, so please don't think of it that way. This is to help the whole public safety grow. Julie.
I think you hit the highlights. I think that was great. Let's see if the board has questions.
Mike, thanks for that presentation. There's a lot to take in on there. One question that came up on when you were talking on a lot of these visits, like wellness checks and dressing changes and things like that. If we weren't doing them, or if we didn't do them, but these folks would have to go to the hospital to have things like that happen, or have a nurse come or somebody else to do that?
Yeah, depending on the level of care needed, a lot of times it would be a visiting nurse, which is, right now, it's very hard to find a visiting nurse in the area, or they would have to go to their primary care or back to a wound clinic to get that taken care of.
Well, the reason I was asking, so are those types of services associated with a cost that we can get reimbursed for? Because, I mean, you're saving some hospital or somebody money to go do these community things, and it does cost the community money also.
Yeah, so that's something we're still long-term trying to figure that out with the hospital. We know that that's going to be an issue, and we are going to have to figure out kind of a cost share. It could be as simple as, if we're going to see a patient and we're doing a wound change, we're getting that material to do the wound change from the hospital. That's just an example, but that it's something we're still looking at.
And I'm not against the community health initiative and everything that you're talking about providing. I just don't like the idea we're saving some hospital corporation money, and we're taking the cost. I would like to share in the money that's generated, or the savings that's generated for something like this, to provide this service on a local level. I think it's only fair.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
Of course.
Fire away, Lee.
As you were talking, I'm thinking about where we're going to be in 5 years and where we were 10 years ago. And it seems like the necessity for the services that you've been talking about, as well as fire and police, have just been increasing over the past decade and will continue to. And I'm wondering if there's something we're missing as to why these requirements are escalating. Is there something that we could be doing better as a community to help people so they're not calling 911, or, there's some other way to do this? Because, again, to repeat what Arnie said, there's a cost to all of this, regardless of which department it is. And, I keep thinking of the taxpayer, and it's like, we're offering all these services, and what's the benefit to me as a taxpayer? And we should all do our fair share. We should do what we need to do to help out our neighbor. I don't have any problems with that, but I'm just trying to think about what the long-term implication is going to be. You mentioned a 3-year pilot, and then 3 years from now, all of a sudden we get whacked with a increase in taxes. How do we present that to the taxpayer in a way that makes it palatable, I guess, is the question I have. And I don't know if you know the answer. I'm just kind of throwing my thoughts out there, because this is it's a potentially big deal from two standpoints. One is, what's the benefit and what's the cost? And I'm not saying that the cost is going to outweigh the benefit, but on the other hand, I think we need to be thoughtful as we go into these types of things to make sure that we're evaluating and able to present to the taxpayer the benefit that they're going to get from it. Maybe not immediately, but or directly, but at least as a community, we're willing to support each other. Now, and you don't have to answer it.
No, that's fine.
Unless you've thought of this philosophical argument.
It's kind of a $1 million question. None of this have we looked at. It's kind of like, we want to make sure that, like, if we're going to do it, we can sustain it, without it, like, drastically increasing anything. It's kind of the reason why everything's been labeled a pilot. If we let's say we're grant funded, if we can't figure out long-term funding in 3 years, it's probably not meant to be then. And we can put it off to the side for a while and see as things change. And again, that's why the transfers. We're offering more service, but hopefully through that transfer, we can mitigate that. I think overall, the increase to the budget it's fairly small. And the hope is that if we can generate that revenue through transfers and it's successful, maybe we can take even further to cover the whole ambulance expenses. I think this whole presentation, we're trying to like throw in a whole bunch of different puzzle pieces to make it
There's a
work.
lot of moving parts. It's a lot of moving parts. I think so there is coming a time down the road where this is what every community is going to be doing. So community health is the initiative that is being looked at federally. And I think that that's happening because of a lot of reasons. What's happening in the hospital setting is, staffing is down, patient readmission is up for all kinds of reasons. Medically speaking, I'm certainly not qualified to speak to them, but for many reasons, as we hear about all the time. I mean, you go to see your primary care. You're not getting in next week. I mean, I remember when Dad was practicing, you could make an appointment and he would see a patient 2 weeks from now. Now, I made an appointment, it's 4 months. So, I mean, that's happening all over the place. And so the EMS Agenda 2050 that was done federally is what's talking about, okay, we have almost every ambulance, or every community has some form of an ambulance or an emergency response. How can that place come in and fill in some of the gap from what the hospitals are seeing? Does everything have to be done at a hospital setting? No. And so if community health through your EMS services can step in and take care of things like, I'm a cancer patient and I've got to go do chemo, but I have to have a blood check before I go. They don't need to go to the hospital's lab for that. Call your local paramedic. They're going to come do your blood draw and verify if you're good to go. I mean, it's those types of things. It's keeping those people out of the hospital or office setting at this lower level so that the higher level people, your doctors, your nurses, can address patients that need that level of care. What is happening throughout the country that's causing that, Lee? You and I can pontificate about that for years. We would have great conversation about it. But those are things that are just simply out of our control. But I think what does happen is with the community health piece, you are preventing readmission through education on health. And look, Mrs. Jane Doe, if you take your medication this way, we won't be coming to see you because your blood sugar dropped to the point that now you're in an emergent situation, right? That's what it creates. And it is simply where the country is going. We are going to be having the same discussion 5 years from now, because this is just simply how healthcare is going in this country.
So along those lines, and I was going to ask, why do you think we're in this position? But that's kind of a fruitless question to get into now.
Lots of reasons.
But as I think about this, I know North Star Health is a federally qualified healthcare provider.
Right.
So they get most of their money as reimbursement through the federal government. Is that something that we see maybe, and this is another crystal ball question, could that kind of funding potentially expand into supporting something like this down the road?
So there was a couple of years ago, I want to say it was the CP3 model through Medicare. And they had a trial period for a while, but they did not have the participation to show that it was actually beneficial. I saw another article last night through the National Association of EMTs. They're going again to legislation about funding models for community health. So it's definitely being looked at. And actually, I have some communication with Blue Cross Blue Shield. They have some interest in how to fund this kind of a program. I think it's trying to get everyone on the same page. I do truly believe that insurance funding is coming. It's just a matter of when.
So the whole healthcare system's evolving, clearly.
It is.
Yes.
And I think too, when the funding pieces, this is where the pilot comes in, right? Is you need the data to support your application for funding. So it's hard to get grants that will fund, an idea. Well, we think this would be great. They want data, they want statistics, they want to know how exactly is it going to work and what is the benefit. So we have built in a lot of metrics of measuring and working with the hospital to determine what are their metrics. Are you seeing from Chester patients, are you seeing a drop in readmission or reoccurrence? What does that look like? And in those conversations with Josh from North Star, I mean, they're going to do those measures as well. And then that's where, when we can show them the benefit, that's where we can come together with funding. I mean, even if they would fund something like the drugs that we have to carry on the bus because we have a paramedic level is huge, right? Even those things are a big deal. So it's as we get going, the relationships build, the funding sources come, but the ask now is because it takes a year to even get there. And so we need to start at some point. The impact to the budget, long-term is not dramatic. It is an increase, for sure. But it was not as high as I thought it would be, to be honest. We would start it with one paramedic. The chiefs and I have all talked about is baby steps. Let's just build this as we go based on the needs that we're seeing. We don't need to do some huge elaborate program and then find out it's overkill for our community. I think we build it as we are finding the needs. And I think we're going to find the needs because every time we turn around, we're having the same conversation about the number of emergency calls that we have, the number of those calls that are mental health. I mean, that's a whole nother topic of conversation that EMS and police are dealing with, that are driving calls. And we can pontificate all night about what's causing that. You and I have our opinions. But, yeah.
The other question I had was relative to communication. And how do we communicate this to the community, both from us, here's what we're doing, and if you need help, call this number or whatever? Because I'm guessing we're trying to reduce the number of 911 calls. Is that part of the
That's part of it,
goal?
yes. So I simply have given business cards out. If there's someone who we kept going, be like, here's my number, call the next day and we can try to figure out, whether it's Senior Solutions or some kind of an agency that can come help you. The way it would be set up, though, ideally, is through a referral program. It could be the primary health care provider or the emergency room could identify there's, of course, criteria to be enrolled in the program. But they see that need and they, ask the patient, would you be interested in this? And they send a referral, and that's how they would get connected with us, is we would get that referral and then reach out to the patient. But I mean, both I and Chief Williams, anytime we see someone who, there's just something else that we feel we could do, we try to offer it out. And I think also this community outreach event on May 2nd, I think that'll be another great time where we'll advertise it, and I'm sure over time word to mouth will spread.
Well, and some of those people presenting on May 2nd those are your special interest articles that we vote at town meeting every year, giving 3,000 here and 5,000 there. So we're trying to get those people to say, this is their opportunity to explain to the community, here's the service that we provide, reach out to us.
You mentioned visiting nurses, which used to be, it seemed like more common. Are they just understaffed like other?
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately,
Do you see this as kind of a fill-in for that? And aren't they paid? How is visiting nurses funded?
I don't know.
that's a good question. I do not have all the answers to that. It is a little bit of a fill-in.
Within our scope.
Within our scope, but
Yeah.
I don't forget who told me, but right now there is no visiting nurses for this area.
So that's a huge gap.
Yeah.
even when there was,
They charged.
several of the trips we made.
Evan,
Gotta do the mic.
You gotta come up with the microphone if you're gonna. All right.
Just saying from experience, taking care of the old man, the majority of the trips to the ER and with the ambulance were because of that gap in care. We were at the hospital, he wasn't better, but the insurance company said you have to leave. So we went home, and things didn't go so well because it could be 4 or 5 days before anybody shows up at the house, if they do at all. And then they're just there to evaluate you, and then they can only do limited amount of things when they're there. There's a whole lot of stuff they can't do. And they basically just say, if you get sick enough, just call the ambulance. And that's what we had to do over and over again. So anybody who's had that experience, I'm sure you know a few people, right?
And I do want to be clear. We do need this paramedic program is going to be amazing if you approve it. But it is not the be-all, end-all of private healthcare in your home. I want to be really, really careful about that. We have a scope of practice that we are very mindful we do not go outside of. Paramedics are definitely trained to a higher level, but they're not, they're not doctors, they're not nurse practitioners, they're not PAs, they're not RNs. So we have a scope that we absolutely have to stay within. And for anybody that asks the questions, we function and operate under a director at Springfield Hospital, who has to approve all this and sign off on this program, which Dr. Nielsen has. Just, it's another point that the community should know. There is a scope, we know it, we stay within it, and our practice is under the direction of one of the doctors at Springfield Hospital. Just, it all of a sudden made me think of that we should
that's an
disclose
important
that
point.
clear.
Yeah.
Julie, what are the details on the grant that you were mentioning and stuff?
So we've applied for a couple different funding sources. We are seeking approval for this and the fire chief piece, which is coming up next. It's all kind of woven together. But we are asking for assistance or for approval without the granting source. But if we get the SAFER grant, that will fund we're doing 3 positions. 2 of them already exist. Our ambulance chief and our second in command already exist. How we are morphing those positions is to say that they are 50% firefighter and 50% EMT. By doing that, and then our full-time fire chief, so 3 full-time positions with benefits are reimbursed to the town. What my plan would be, if we were to be fortunate and receive that, my plan would be we gradually increase our budget over 3 years. We don't want to all of a sudden say for the next 3 years we have no salary expense and then, jump ourselves. We would gradually increase ourselves over 3 years. As that revenue comes in, this would all flow through the grant fund so that there would actually, for a couple of years, we would see a surplus because we will have budgeted the salaries. We have to be careful in the way the grant functions. We've got to be careful how we do all this. But we would step it so that it's not a real hit to the taxpayer. At the same time that that's happening, the transfer service is building.
So there's a source of revenue coming as the grant wears out.
Correct.
There was mentioned, Mike, in the presentation, something about a dedicated response vehicle? Is that?
That's
besides
long-term.
That's the long-term.
That's very
long-term.
long-term. That is very long-term. When there are, with these programs that are very successful, if we ever got to the point of where we have multiple paramedics, if the demand was like that, then I think we would look
It's
at
a
something
demand
like
thing.
I
It's
think
not
we
a
would look at
necessity.
a response vehicle, yeah. But that's not an ask for now.
No.
When Mike wrote the grant for the congressional appropriation, we threw in a response vehicle. Why not? But right now, that is not an ask. No.
Any other questions? Comments?
Thank you, Chief, that was great. Really appreciate it.
Great presentation, thanks.
Appreciate it.
The issue at this point would be if we as a board want to take this to the next step, which is the money part of it, the financing of this, and approving this. There's the numbers were given.
Yep.
Julie gave you a couple of sheets with the numbers as they are with their, and they're without the grant. Basically, we should consider this without the grant.
Without the grant,
because
correct,
the
'cause the
grant would
grant
be-
ends in 3
would
years, so-
helpful
right,
in the
right,
end,
right.
but we have to look at it as if we don't get, as if we don't get the grant.
And the numbers that I gave you basically show that if you add the paramedic, have Mike be a paramedic and institute the program, and add your full-time fire chief, it has about a $60,000 a year implication, which for all of that, we did not feel was a lot of money.
That beginning
That's-
year one?
That's also with the interfacility transfers.
Right, exactly, that's encompassing everything. And with one paramedic.
So would that be year one? Or is
That
it-
would be 2025.
Okay.
So for 2024, if you were to implement everything now, number one, Mike would have to go to school, so the paramedic piece doesn't come in, but the transport service could when we receive the ambulance. So if we were able to start the transport service in October, and were to basically therefore do 25%, so 25 calls, it's 70% reimbursement, and you had your fire chief, maybe we hire, but it's effective, halfway through, so it's effective July 1 or June 1, that impact to the budget is $11,000 for 2024. Because the transfer service helps offset everything.
So how do we replace Mike while he's at school?
So you talk about the training.
Well, we understand the training, we just need another Mike,
So it's 1 day a week.
1 day a week. Oh,
The rest of it's online.
The rest of it's online or it's clinical time on off hours. So as long as we still have myself and another person, we'll just shift the schedule, so we're still covered 7 days a week.
okay, yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
What shape is the old ambulance in? I mean, you're
Well,
talking about
we've-
Dartmouth and traveling a little further and actually getting a little more use probably than it has when it was just 911 emergency calls.
So we've put in $15,000 in repairs over the last year and a half. So a lot of kind of major components have been replaced. It's not in the best shape. But that's kind of another reason why we're saying a year, maybe 2 years of kind of trying it out. Because that's realistically probably how much life it has left in it. There's different ways to kind of, if we wanted to maintain that same ambulance, you can do a remount, which is half the cost of a brand new ambulance. That's more down the road. We just want to see if we can actually make this work.
And the needs of the ambulance are different if it is just simply for a transport service versus an
Correct.
emergency service.
Not that I would want to, but we could even go down to a van-styled ambulance, which is significantly cheaper for those interfacility transfers. So there's options, but I think we have a year left of it, maybe.
Yeah, we've talked about, we have talked about, and the mechanic has said, a year to two, we have put a significant amount of money in it. We would increase in the budget, we would probably increase a bit of vehicle maintenance in case, but again, the reason for a pilot, to just kind of see, does this generate enough revenue that it can be self-sustaining?
It's really a business plan that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly,
Right, yeah.
exactly.
Ben Whalen, acting fire chief, and something to throw in here. So the fire service, and I'm going to morph this into Chester's public safety group. So it's fire-based EMS now, based on the fact of the EMS is the part of revenue for the municipality. So doing that transfer service, if you look at ambulances throughout the state, throughout the nation, they are increasing their staffing and their vehicles throughout time based on the ability to grab that revenue stream. So that's not something it's not a new concept nationally. It's a new concept for us to be thinking about here. And I think 3 years ago, with the status of all of our emergency services, it may not have been a conversation we would have even entertained. But with how the ambulance service is doing now, how public safety is working well together, I would endorse it, and I think it's a great opportunity to help us move forward in a good direction that's not going to kind of leave us scratching in a few years of what are we doing.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to throw in, I'm surprised no one brought it up there, is space. Where do we keep a second ambulance?
Building.
And that's something we've already chatted about, and we have the space in-house to make that work. So we'll work together, because that's what we do, and go from there.
Excellent.
Thanks, Ben.
So I'm looking at and I know we're not talking about budgets, but right now, the total public safety budget for 2024 is 1.03 million. And this first option that we're talking about is 1.09, almost 1.1 million. So it would be a bit of an increase, the $60,000, whatever it is. Do you know what percentage of the budget that is?
I don't,
The
but
overall
40,000 raises a penny, so it would be about a penny and a half.
But I mean, as far as the 1.09, is
I don't
that
know.
like 10% of the town budget, or?
Well, our budget is just about 4 million.
About 25%.
So it's
So about 25%.
Okay.
Yep, yep. And that 60,000 is also your full-time fire chief. It's everything.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not just the paramedic piece. Yeah. That's all of it.
When I looked at the presentation and heard what was going on, I always thought that doing nothing for our public safety and our EMS buildings and just keeping things the same because if that's the way it was done is actually going backwards. I just really feel that if we don't keep up with the times and the changes that are happening and try to meet the needs of the community, we're going to fall behind. And it's a hard choice to make because of the money that's involved. But I think, in my case, it's a choice that I think it's a necessary thing. It's a pilot program. If the thing totally crashes and burns in a couple of years, we could definitely pull away from it and say we gave it our best. We tried to do what we could do, and it didn't work out. I think something like this is what Julie was saying. It's where public health is turning. We talked about public safety. We talked about public health. And the fact that we have three different factions at the Emergency Service Building working together to accomplish this says a lot for our town and a lot for what we're trying to accomplish. I am for something like this, and I would support it as far as that added cost is for this first year. And that'll give us a good start and see where we go from there. And we have a couple of years to see how it works, see how everything happens. And hopefully that grant will come in. And
That would be beautiful.
I never really wanted to see grants, and I know it happened at the schools a lot of times. The federal government would come in and fund things for 2 or 3 years with a grant, and everybody would jump on board, and everybody would say it was okay, and then in 3 years, they pull the money out, and you're on your own. In this case, we're preparing for it. We're doing it as we step forward, and we're realizing that that is not the case, whether we get that money or not. And I think that's the way to look at it, and I still support it even without the grant. Oh, boy, I'm in trouble now.
Losing your ears, Arnie.
Can I ask or say one more thing? Thank you, Arnie. I agree, pretty much. The question I have, a lot of this is still speculative. So if we were to approve this evening, could we expect a report back if numbers come in lower, shifting this place, that place? This feels like if we were to move forward, it's an act of faith in both the grant coming in, but we're doing this without knowing about the grant. But there's also a lot in this that feels like it's going to shift around within what we've agreed.
It's a lot of moving
If we were
parts.
to agree.
Yes.
Okay, and what's the reporting back to us structure? Just part of the
I would
Julie
say,
report
I
on
would say
old-
let's report back when we do quarterly financials. That's going to be our tell right there,
Yep.
is going to be in the dollars. And so I think when we do quarterly financials, then that's when we do an update on where the community health piece is at. Being mindful that the community health piece won't really start, I mean, the transfer part will start, but the paramedic level community health won't start yet. But certainly the transfer service will, and that should be very visible, right, in your quarterly financials. So I think that's when we make a special note to say, let's look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to say one more thing. As with anything else, I think communication is going to be the biggest hurdle we face. And I agree with Arnie as far as the value of this program and giving it a shot to see how it goes. I think that as our population ages, we're all going to be taking advantage. I am sooner than some others, but we're going to be taking advantage of this. And from that perspective, I think we need to be good citizens and give it the support that it needs. But that being said, there are a lot of people in town who are going to look at the money and they're going to want to say, what's the value to me? Why is my tax dollar going to support this when I have no direct benefit? And so I think that, I'm sure this is going to happen, but I would encourage that there is a large rollout, that we bang all the bells and all of that to let people know what's going on. We see this in every faction of our lives, is communication is critical and it's very difficult. So my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreedly.
Anybody else, any other questions or comments?
Well, the only thing I'm thinking, I'm in support of this as well. And Lee, your points are good. Not everybody will see the benefit, but it is a quality of life thing for Chester as well. And I don't know, this might be a stretch, but it feels like it ties into the whole housing thing. If we're going to attract new housing here, quality of life plays into that. So, you know, where do I want to live? Do I want to live in the middle of the woods in Wyndham? Maybe. Or do I want to live in Chester because they have great healthcare services and emergency services there? So, it could be one, that could be one more little factor there in support of it.
Julie, what would you need in the way of a motion as far as, I mean, we have 3 options on here. I know we're going without Grant and 1 paramedic.
I would say at this point right now that you're doing a motion to approve the step up to paramedic level service. That will authorize Mike to be able to go get his education and take that step. And then to allow us to start the transport service. I don't know that either one of those need to be motions. I think because they're not reflected in the budget, it would be appropriate for it to be motions. But basically, yeah, this step right here is bump up to a paramedic level service so Mike can get his training and transport service. That's what and then when we actually have a paramedic in place, a lot of the rest of it will start to unfold.
So since we're not voting on money, we're just basically showing our support for this particular program. Is that
Basically, I mean, it will have a budget effect, and the
But
two
not-
pieces go together.
But
Yep.
not in '24.
Well, the interfacility, the transport service will have a budget effect in '24. The other will have a revenue effect in '24. But where it will have a financial effect in '24 is that we will not be trading in or selling our old ambulance, we'll be keeping it. So I would like to know that I have a motion from the board authorizing us to be able to do that.
So.
Because that's not a decision I would make on my own.
Yeah, and I forgot to ask this question earlier. What would be the resale value or trade-in value of the?
What was it, like
ambulance?
$15,000 or something?
we
It was
get
a stupid
nothing.
number.
No, I know.
The manufacturers gave us a number of 10,000.
So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Well,
to-
that's why it's like, this is the
Yeah.
perfect time to try it.
Right.
Let's just see,
Well, I guess I could make the motion that we authorize the ambulance chief, Mike Ranzio, to do the paramedic training, and we start the process of the transfer.
Perfect.
All right, second.
He's the motion and Peter's the second. Any other further discussion on this topic? All those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Well, we took our, Sean, I asked for there more comments, but would just voted.
It has nothing to do with that. Is this envisioned as being a Chester thing? Or, I mean, we provide ambulance service. Are we also providing community health service to Andover? That's just a question to, where would that stand?
I would think that we are under contract with them, so I would think that, but again, a discussion to have next year, because that's going to have an effect on their budget. So maybe it's a conversation for them to say, we would like you to offer that for us as well. That's probably where I would go, is a conversation with them to see if it's something that they want.
But I would, you know, if they want to take advantage, that transport service doesn't have to just be Chester.
No.
It could be
No, no.
from the surrounding towns anywhere around here.
That's a
use
call
that
from the
service.
hospital. That's a call from the hospitals to say we have a transport. Yeah.
Because that's the revenue side of it.
Yeah.
I was going to say something before Sean interrupted me, and I just totally blanked out. I'm sorry.
Gotta take notes.
You see my paperwork up there? I'm full of notes. Thank you, everybody, for the presentation, and hopefully it's the first step in the direction that we want to go, and it works out. Thanks a lot for everything.
They're not going anywhere because
I
you're
know.
next.
Next item on our agenda is our fire chief position. We have our acting Chief Ben Whalen here with us. And Julie, can you give us the history on this?
I can. So you've heard me talk about this recently as well. And this kind of fits part and parcel with all of what you just talked about. There is a connection here. So we really are at a place where I would like, the ask here is that we make our fire chief position a full-time position. This rounds out our public safety department. There are a lot of benefits to having 3 full-time chiefs in that department. There is a lot in the fire department that hasn't been done simply because it's a part-time position and not even a regularly scheduled part-time position. As with everything that we are seeing across municipalities, state, federal, NFPA, all those guidelines are increasing with more mandates, more things that are required, more trainings that are required, more work to be done. And departments are finding that you just can't do it on you can't do it on a volunteer basis, period. And you can't do it on a part-time basis anymore. We are not looking to take our fire department to a full-time service. That's not where we're at. But having a full-time fire chief in-house would resolve several issues. Number one, the fire chief would be also EMT certified, so you'd have your second, you'd have another second during the day for calls. Again, continuing with the crossover, just like a lot of the 2 full-time ambulance staff will be firefighter 1s, at least, right? I think you're doing firefighter 2. So there is definitely continued crossover for your daytime, which is when it's hardest to get coverage, by the way. And in my memo to you guys, I listed some of these benefits that we have all talked through. There's a lot of enhanced community engagement opportunities. I mean, you guys just had, how many little kids were over there at the station from Parent-Child Center?
20 kids and 20.
Yeah, I mean, the community engagement piece, having a full-time fire chief, I mean, Chief Ranzio and Chief Williams do a lot of that stuff. Having a full-time fire chief allows the opportunity there as well. Obviously, improved response due to incident command decisions being made much quicker. Not every call will require us to empty the fire department with all the, so that also can equal savings in dollars over time. But just better response. We would anticipate that this would also take on the fire warden position, so better response there. And much to Mike's happiness, they would also take on the health officer position, where Mike would be probably I would think would serve as the deputy to that. The ability to complete pre-plans. There's one thing we don't have in this town, and Ben, step up and if I'm misstating anything. Pre-plans for commercial buildings, something that we really don't have now. Pre-plans for hazardous sites. I mean, we talked about, remember Mr. Gleason was in that time talking about the rail, what happens if we had a rail train derailment here, what happens. Having a full-time person on staff allows us to pre-plan for those things because you have time. Again, it's time to get all of this done isn't there with a less than part-time person. Again, continuity with other departments. Again, lobbying power, all these guys are connected with the chiefs associations of their various departments throughout the state. I mean, you can read my list. I can keep listing it if you want. But it just goes, the list goes on and on. And there is the potential down the road to generate revenue through potential of taking on state fire inspections. I would say let's not really get into that discussion tonight. There's a lot to that to unravel, but there are communities that are taking that piece on through a memorandum of understanding with the state. It is a revenue generator. But there's things we need to consider before we have that discussion. But there are opportunities for generating revenue in the fire piece as well. And looking at, the other thing that I think is really important to note is that these three gentlemen are amazing grant writers. I mean, the SAFER grant, the AFG grant, Alicia with the Homeland Security grant, any grant that has to do with public safety, I have been able to completely hand off. And it's huge. And not only have I handed it off, they write way better grants than I do when it comes to public safety because they know their departments, right? And so that's a piece that I can shift. But again, as you all know from hearing me, like those grants take a lot of time. And it also will free up a lot of Steve's time from the facilities. Steve does a lot of work because he is also a captain on our fire department. There are stuff that Steve did. He wouldn't have to do those things because our fire chief would be in-house. So again, it's just continuity of how things work. It's just a better flow. And it really is just the next position that makes sense. Chester is not the only town that is taking this step. There are many throughout the state that I have heard about that are moving to full-time fire chiefs for this very reason. Public safety in general has a greater demand. And we hear, the buzzword now is regionalization. It's not a thing in southern Vermont. They're finding it to be even more expensive in northern Vermont. So it's not that we can just sit back and say, well, wait for somebody else to cover us. That's not going to work, and that doesn't happen. Even if regionalization was a thing, Chester would not be a town covered by another town. We would likely be a town covering another town, is what would happen, just because of our situation and where we sit. And again, it's response. It's one of those things that you really don't want to pay for in your tax dollars until your house is on fire, and then you want to pay for it in your tax dollars. So it's kind of one of those things. But it's just the next ad for public safety, and it is what rounds it out. It's what completes that over there to have really good continuity amongst those three departments. In the services that they provide, and it all overlaps because of the cross-training, because of so many things. The transport service will help offset the expense of adding a fire chief. Again, it just helps cover that entire budget. Again, like Ariana said earlier, there's speculations and numbers, and we have to monitor, but the ad of the fire chief is the next step. And the reason I am doing most of the talking and not Ben is for full disclosure. I am going to have him say a few things, but for full disclosure, Ben is likely one who would be applying for the position, so we didn't want it to come across that he's fighting for a job, right? Like, we don't want it to be that way. But I do want Ben to speak on it because he has a wealth of knowledge, having worked in the Fire Academy for so many years and having been a member of Chester Fire for a very long time. He has a perspective that I think is important. But we did want to have full disclosure that Ben would likely be applying for this job. I'm assuming would be applying for this job. So do you want to
Ask a question
take
first.
my muddleness and make it something really nice and pretty for them? Okay.
So, yeah, I just want to ask
Yeah.
a quick question. You talked a little bit about inspections. So are we able?
Which I said, let's not elaborate on, but go ahead.
Right. No, but the question is relative to short-term rentals.
Yes.
Since the state is not going that direction, is that something that our fire chief could do, is do those short-term rental inspections?
If we have a fire chief who is certified to do state inspections, then yes.
So that's not something that we could do just to our own protocol?
My understanding is they would need to be certified with the state as an inspector.
Everybody's looking your way.
I know.
Ben.
Can you respond to that, Ben? I think that's right.
So
but-
my blanket statement for Division of Fire Safety stuff will be chat with Landon Wheeler.
Yeah.
Who's the regional manager in the Springfield office. What I would say is you would need a memorandum of understanding with the state, and they would have their own requirements there of what you would have to do for that. And then that MOU would further discuss what all that person would be able to do. Because certainly DFS does a lot more than short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Sure,
So-
yeah.
Yeah.
But I just was thinking, another revenue source is having the ability to do that for our own
Yes,
purposes.
yes.
Or even our neighbors and other towns around us.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't my perspective. Initially, was just like, we were talking earlier about short-term rentals and the whole inspection piece of it, and it was like state saying, no, you can't do that, or they're not gonna do it because they don't have the personnel, so. Anyway, sorry, Ben.
Yeah.
No, I think Julie hit on it pretty good. I'd be more comfortable answering any questions that
Okay,
folks have.
that's fine.
Checking what our call is at the moment right now.
Looks like they all got a call.
Or you- I don't know why I'm
Can you
getting
stay, or
called
do
to-
you need to go? You have to go? Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
You headed? Okay. Oh, you're going to stay? You- Okay, got it.
Sorry about that. We had a meeting up the high school today and discussing their emergency operations plan. I think that's what they were calling it. And the question came about of how long is it going to take the fire department to get here? And when you think about that, 15 minutes, right? And that's 15 minutes during the day. And I think it's the key part of that is one person going to be able to go change that entire scenario? No. But the ability to get somebody, a command officer there quicker to be able to call for the resources that are needed. You take something like the school or the elementary school, and you've taken that 15-minute time period and you've whittled that down to, if that person's at the firehouse, as an example, 2 minutes. 2 minutes for someone to be on scene to say, it's a false alarm. We don't need everybody running through town and potentially causing accidents, et cetera, or to say, hey, we have an actual incident at our school and we need these additional resources. And you can blow that from the school to a house to anywhere else. And in the realm of fire, time is the concept that matters. And it was interesting. So I've now been with Chester since I was 14 or 15. And the concept that they taught us back then was that a mobile home would burn in 10 minutes and a house you had like 30 minutes. 30 minutes there to show up and do some form of corrective action. And as the building materials have changed, as the furnishings have changed, that time span has gone from that, maybe it was, well, if you look at old videos of legacy fires, 25 to 30 minutes, and the fire could even potentially cut itself out. And that time frame is now 2 to 2.5 minutes to a flashover within the house. So That's just like, again, worst case scenario. I think as you think about the position and how Julie was going about it, the idea of working with the community, doing fire safety stuff with kids in the schools, being there for the community, and then working on your target hazards and thinking about your pre-planning of incidents and actually putting those to fruition is really good stuff. So I am potentially going to apply for the position. I want to be clear about that. As Heather Chase said, we did lots of conflict of interest training back in my days on the select board. So that was a decision we made together. So I am happy to answer anything about our fire service as far as, but anything that's going to kind of relate to specific questions of the job, I would relate to Julie.
I have a quick, I'm not looking for a really lengthy answer. How many volunteer firefighters do we have, and would the full-time fire chief be perceived as the manager of those people, as well as the manager of how do you manage those volunteer services?
I think I can answer that one if you're okay with that. So right now we have 18 firefighters on the department. Of those, so we currently have 6 people in Fire 2. The majority of our firefighters are all at a certified level, and they'll actually be to a certified firefighter 2 level, which by the Fed standards is huge. So do I think 18 is the number we want to stay at? No, I think we want to grow that number and bring people in. As far as management of the department goes, I don't see that changing with a new position. You would still have the current rank structure we have. So you have a chief of department, a deputy chief, and then within the past year, we've really tried to work on that chain of command, not necessarily to break people apart, but actually to bring them more together with some better communication, because communication is it makes it or breaks it. So how it works right now is we have 2 captains, 2 lieutenants. Each captain has their own lieutenant, and then each lieutenant has right now 5 to 6 firefighters that are under them. And so that would be their direct line of command. Certainly if those folks aren't there, they can go to different officers if they need to talk to them, and then it works its way up to the chief. And since I took over as acting chief, I've really tried to distribute roles and responsibilities. It gives a lot of buy-in to what folks are doing and gives them an opportunity to grow. So that chain of command would stay. I think I answered all your questions.
You did, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?
So,
Go ahead.
Ben, I don't have any more questions for you. Thank you. I just want to make another statement, I guess, relative to communicating this particular move. And honestly, this one's going to be a harder sell. As you were going through the list of reasons why this is a great idea, I was a little bit more skeptical of the rationale. Not that I don't think we should go in this direction, but I think that this is going to be a harder sell to the constituency as far as paying for this particular position, because right now it doesn't look like it's broken. And what you were saying is that there's a lot of stuff that's not getting done that a full-time fire chief could do. And the list that you gave me as you were talking, or gave us, was certainly comprehensive, but not necessarily persuasive from a standpoint of, oh yeah, this is a definite need. That being said, it may just be more transparency into where we're going to go, what the short-term goal is, and then what the long-term goal of this particular effort is, and being able to show the need for the immediate need for this particular move. I've had conversations with a number of constituents, and they're like, "Oh, we can't afford this. You know, there's more money being spent, and how do we increase the revenue the whole thing with the ambulance and the paramedic and all that makes a lot of sense because it's an immediate income generating proposition. But in this instance, I'm not sure that we want the fire chief to be income generating, but on the other hand, the money's got to come from somewhere. So I think from a perspective of looking out 5 years and do we need this, the answer is yes, absolutely. It's just going to be a little bit harder to sell to the public at this point, from my perspective.
So I have a question. How many hours has Ben putting in now?
More than have been put in before.
I bet, right. I mean, if we're
So to that point, if you want the work done, you're going to be paying for it. There are, this is one of those, to the public, it may look like the system is not broken. And are we responding to calls? Yes. If your house is on fire, are we going to get there? Yes. There's more to just responding to a fire call. And I think that probably is the part that a lot of people don't understand about the fire service. And again, the three parts work together. So, and especially EMS and fire work together. So the continuity between the departments is huge. And again, I know it sounds like a bunch of, you need to convince me, you need to persuade me. I think there's a lack, and maybe it is an education thing, there's a lack of understanding exactly all that the fire department does. Because the system is broken. There's a lot of things that are not being done that need to be done. Training by itself of fire personnel is huge. Are you okay?
I got to head up to that call.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Yes, please do.
Hopefully Mike can fend himself off for a little while. Tom Williams, Chief of Police. Say that the system may not be broken, but the stuff, I'm one of the firefighters, one of the 18 that's there. I've been a firefighter for 36 years now, just now on Chester. There's a lot of stuff in the background that doesn't get flown. It's the communication thing because it's in the office setting. It's behind the scenes. The NFPA regulations themselves. Ben's been code enforcement for a while now, and he goes through those books front to back. The stuff that applies to the fire service alone is overwhelming. The stuff that we have to keep up on for liability. Tank, I'm going to help me out with the wording here. The certification for the inside of the tanks, make sure they're not cracked. Hydrostats. Just little things like that. They're specific on timing, when you have to do them, how you have to do them. Equipment, jackets, pants, boots, they all have certain stipulations on them or regulations that they have to be replaced. It doesn't matter if they're good or not afterward. When that time frame's done, they're done. All of the admin in the background to do the money to get up to that point, so we're not buying $100,000 worth of equipment tomorrow. We're saving over the course of time. We're fitting this in, and we've got a certain schedule to stuff. There's a ton of that, and I think the SOPs, the procedures, they haven't been updated in years. I don't think they're really
Years.
written. They were
And
taken
some
from
are not
another
even,
department.
yeah, some are
that
non-existent.
They need to be specific to our stuff. That's going to take a ton of time, and that is liability. That is huge money if something goes south. To have a part-time person in there, you're going to pick away at some stuff, absolutely. But they're, from the workload side of it and from the chief side of it, for the liability and keeping the town out of the trouble and keeping our firefighters safe, the gear safe, the civilians safe, I think that's a huge benefit. I mean, if it's a little bit of tax money, I say a little bit because I don't know what the numbers are. I don't have them right now. But whatever that is, the costs on the other side, you have one firefighter hurt because one of these things is off. That's a huge liability that's going to get paid out. That'll make that tax increase look like nothing. If volunteer, full-time, whatever you want to, it's the same regulations. We're held to the same standard. We need somebody that's in there that can monitor that. Just keeping on top of that stuff is overwhelming.
And that's exactly what I was wanting to hear. And Susan's taking notes, so. And again, this is the communication I think needs to happen. Because I'm not bashing Julie, but the things
He
that
didn't
were
like
said
my cell, so I'm glad you were here.
was different than what you just said, and that's what we all need to hear. Us sitting behind this table and everybody out there needs to hear that, because that's important. And
You take the extreme that I just talked about, and you take something as simple as today's meeting with the school. For me to reach out, or for Mike in the ambulance to reach out, the one thing we're missing over there is the firefighter that's sitting in the building, that we all of a sudden have a meeting that's coming up, we need presence there. The other person's part-time, so they've got a full-time job someplace to survive. Can they make it? I know from past history with me, requesting something as simple as going to the school and serving ice cream. I know that's not an emergency or anything like that, but it's part of that community policing. We're running the ambulance the same way, the community EMS version of it anyway. The fire department's been no different. We've tried to include the fire department. There's nobody there. The chief's not a full-time person. We can reach out to them, and if their schedule fits, we might get somebody, or we might get a designated person to come in. But something as simple as today, all three of us are on the same page. We're talking about future planning potentials of an emergency operations plan for all different events at the high school, which we're also going to merge with the grade school, because those kids will grow up and end up at the high school. They might as well be on the same plan ahead of time. That went together so easily today with Ben being able to be there, instead of searching and then making a fourth and fifth meeting and then trying to remember what the first meeting was even about. This is the piece that's missing. Your public safety is all three. And I understand them, I totally get the money, I totally get all of that too, but this is the one piece that's missing, and I think it will solve a lot of problems, and it will also keep a lot of liability off the town. And there's your money. You saved a ton of money right there. It's hard to quantify because I don't have an incident that's going on, which is why we're here.
No, and that's perfect, thank you.
All right.
That definitely helped with the justification and some of the reasoning behind it. And when I see the folks that are speaking to this issue, and I know you have a vested interest in it because you're in that service, they're still taxpayers also. And I can't imagine a taxpayer is going to come up here and try to just spend some money so I can get a cushy job or something. It doesn't work that way. And I think that the fire chief's job, it is at this point part-time, and it's hard to have a strong vested interest in the department and everything that happens there day to day without being fully committed to it and having that flexibility to be able to do all those things that you're mentioning, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we're not even aware of that's going to happen in the background to make the department a better department. I'm curious, is something like this another step to eventually having a manned fire department? Is that usually the first step, or this is just something separate?
I think that would be a different problem down the road at a different time. I don't think that's what we're trying to solve.
No.
The public safety thing right now with our merging positions, we're trying to give the taxpayers their money's worth, and we're going over and above. Myself as a police chief, I'm not obligated to switch hats and jump on a fire truck. I'm not obligated to switch hats and jump on the ambulance. We do. I don't ask for a penny more than I get when I'm working my normal shift anyway. It's just what we do, and that's who we're looking for hiring people. It's providing more of that service. You're paying for one, you're getting three, sometimes two, but you're getting more for your money. So yes, you're getting a cost in there in your taxes someplace, minimal, maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure, depends on what we're talking about. But the outcome is providing that extra bit to the public. Faster response times. If let's say we just did it the other day, was the fire call we just went to, the Loudons. A car crash. It could have been actually fairly serious on 103 North. It was myself in a fire truck. It was Steve Vertifay from our facilities. It was Ben. Mike Ranzio went with the ambulance. I had another couple officers that were on because it was shift change. We had a ton of people there. It looked like a parade. We had tons of people there to do the jobs if we needed to. It was covered. Whereas I don't even know if the fire truck would have made it there at some point if we weren't around. If Ben wasn't already at the station, you might be waiting for a while. That's what we're aiming for, is that service that's, 2 minutes, you need CPR, 2 minutes is a long time. You need that ambulance there, you need the defib, 2 minutes is a long time. This helps. We're not going to solve every problem. We're not going to be perfect at it. That's why we're trying to feel our way around, see what the public wants. We've asked a ton of people. We've talked to a ton of people. You talk about the communication. I've been up talking to the seniors up at the end of the green, and they love it. They love what we're doing with stuff. And it's all of this. It's piecing these little pieces together and see what works. If it doesn't work, we stop or we change it. And a lot of that's just by asking people, what do you want? Does this work for you? Is this something you're willing to support? And we've got an overwhelming amount of support by doing it. This is that last piece. If you're looking at public safety, we don't have the chief in there. And there's a lot of stuff that falls under that chief's position that would make this whole program better functioning. Because we're working as a team, so it's helping me out in the police department because I've got a fire resource at an administrative level that I can deal with immediately because they're there when I'm there. You know, the ambulance chief is in there. He's there doing the same thing, and it's just, we're missing the piece. We got a puzzle that's missing a piece in it. And I think if we put that piece in there, the end result, even if it's a little bit of money, is not going to be as much money if we leave that piece out. That puzzle's never going to get solved, and someone's going to get ticked off and want their money back for the puzzle. Yeah, we don't want people getting hurt. We want to provide them the best thing we can for as cheap as we can. I say that easily, I guess, cheap to the taxpayer, not cheap on the treatment that they get when we get there. But either way, I got to head to that call.
Thanks, Tom.
All right.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Chief.
It helps to have a little more information and the justification for some of the actions that we take. And I think what you were saying about the communication is paramount in this case too, because we are responsible to the taxpayer, but we're also responsible to the citizens' safety and what goes on in this town. And if there's a way that we improve the safety of our citizens, there's a cost associated with it. So we sit there and we weigh the cost and the safety factor and what can we do for our citizens that we think is worth that money that we're spending. And I think it helped a lot to hear from the different folks involved.
Absolutely.
That it gave me a little more assertiveness as far as being for something like this, hearing all the different opinions and what goes on and what's happening. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments?
Well, when you look at this, I used to work in a forensic engineering firm, and NFPA and what they do every year behind their desks where they just add another, it's another thing. It's another thing. This would be safer if you did this. You're going to have to register to do that. And it just becomes required. It is for the safety, but it's the biggest unfunded mandate in the world. And the thing is, for us to maintain our insurance, we have to maintain to the NFPA standard. And the only way you're going to get that done is by having somebody who does all that work. We're very lucky as far as I'm concerned because we have Ben here who's really homegrown. Absolutely. He's yeah, he has. Been right up here since he was a kid.
Don't put him on the spot yet.
I'm not going to put him on the spot, but I know, so you know what's going to work with the integrated service. We know that what we did in the past, where we had the fire department was over here and you had the police department in this building, it was just little separate clubs. You got players that are working together that are going to make something happen. And that's huge, absolutely huge. One of the things that I asked to have the budget put up, but one of the things that didn't get put in here was starting off the ambulance revenue this year. That's not in here.
What do you mean, starting off the ambulance
Because
revenue?
you're going to start in October, and our fiscal year starts with the year. So
With the
we're going to have a
transport?
quarter, we're going to have a quarter of transport money in here.
So, right, I did not give you when this is implemented in '24. Now, I did do it.
You
I
did do
just-
it, right.
Yeah,
Now,
I did do
then-
it.
then-
So I will tell you, if you add the fire chief position halfway through the year, which we're getting very close to, and you had transport services starting in October, so saying you had October, November, December for transport services.
Right.
The bottom line impact to the 2024 budget is an additional $11,000.
11th, and the thing is, the number that was shown at the bottom of the sheet, which was the 60,000.
For 25, yep,
No, this is for,
That's for next year.
that's for the next year.
25, yeah.
But the thing is, you already looked at that number and said, you're thinking that was all the public health, and the fire chief was in that number.
Correct. That 60,000
That's
includes the
right.
fire chief, correct.
So,
Correct.
for $11,000, it sounds like to me we could start a fire chief in June, and then start to get things cleaned up. I think that that's a possibility. I mean, I feel for Ben because I know how much paperwork the NFPA is, and if the person before him wasn't keeping up on it, then it's really behind, because you're gonna have to go back and reinsert things that were not done. And we're gonna end up paying him as a volunteer, or we could get him on as a chief and get it, and finish the job.
Julie, what was the slated start date?
I anticipated June 1st, July 1st. I just figured 6 months of salary.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
It seems like we are in agreement.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah.
Come on up.
So as far as NFPA things, I do certainly want to say, yes, the standards are changing on a constant basis. So as, just for clarity of the past chief, I do want to, I think as far as keeping up with existing standards, I don't think we were out of compliance with that. It's moving forward and continuing to get things done the way they're supposed to, so.
And the
I just wanted
things
to
that we're
clarify
not able to get done, we're certainly not a fault of the chief. It was a fault of no hours. Like, he has a full-time job.
Right.
That's where maybe things that needed to get done that didn't get done. We're transitioning. We want to transition into a better service where we can, you know what I'm saying. I don't need to repeat it again. You know what I'm saying. You've heard it.
Well, I think we all agree that it would have definitely a positive impact on the emergency services, on the services that we provide for the citizens. On this one, it's partly is the money.
Absolutely.
Is where it comes down to. And most of our decisions that we make, they're budget related, they're money related. The easy ones are the ones where the grants come in and we're just able to do what we have to do. This one is more of there's a direct connection between money and how we're going to go forward with the fire department. I would entertain a motion to approve the position of fire chief as a full-time position. I guess the details would be worked out as far as salary. Does that come into part of the motion at this point, or is that, no, that's for later on?
You're just creating the position at this point.
But there is a range on there. So I would entertain a motion to approve having our fire chief as a full-time position commencing.
I would say the position would start maybe June 15th. That gives me time to advertise and hire and all of that, and then we have a set date. Yeah.
Move to approve the transition from part-time to full-time fire chief for Chester on or around July 15th?
June 15th.
June 15th.
June 15th?
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Ariana's the motion and Lee is the second. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? No? Well, Ben, thanks for your time and helping us out with the information regarding this issue. We'll see how everything goes, and thanks again.
Thank you.
The chair.
Come back.
And I will thank Tom.
Yes.
Yeah. Next item is our local emergency management plan adoption. The only thing that's changed on this, I guess, is the fire chief. Otherwise, it's
Right.
pretty much the way it's been over the years, or till last year at least.
We did a thorough review and update last year. So this year, it is a change of taking out Matt, who is retired, and adding in Ben as our acting chief. Yep. you
So
do
we need a motion on it?
Yeah, you don't sign it anymore, so you need a motion to approve it.
So I can make a motion to approve the local emergency management plan document as presented.
Second?
Lee's the motion, Ariana's the second. Anybody have any questions, concerns, or comments on the plan? This one's basically just housekeeping with that minor
Yes.
change.
Yes.
All those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? And the next one is also pretty much housekeeping, our annual highway financial plan adoption, which is giving the state the information that we spend a minimum of whatever it is that they want us to spend on our roads. And we spend a lot more than the minimum.
Correct. So there's two places to sign on this, Ernie.
So we need a motion on that one too, or this one? No.
No, because you're signing it. You're signing. So you've got two spots here.
So while you're signing that, I just want to make one comment. I was reading the Town of Chester job description for the chief,
Yep.
the fire chief. And I thought it was very interesting that the fire chief applicant would have to be at least 18 years of age and have 15 years of experience. So my grandson will be eligible to start his fire stuff in a year and a half.
Your new first volunteer, new volunteer.
The other thing I thought was interesting is that the fire chief has to sign this particular document for his position.
Well, you got to agree. It's an acknowledgement that he understands his job
Okay,
description.
so, but that was the employee, and then there's a fire chief approving it. as
Oh,
well.
well, probably the town manager would approve it. Because it would be a department manager. We'll change that.
Well, this is the deal, see? If it drops after midnight, I have to do it. If it drops before midnight, it's Donna starts. See? So I'm really hoping it drops soon. Because the first one, there could be a second one in there, and it could be an hour or so away, so it's like,
I'm looking forward to a year from now when we come back and we revisit all this and then it's all a success and it's working.
It is going to.
I actually have a
Services, the ambulance, the fire chief.
It's going there, and I think that's the piece that people don't understand. We're going to end up there. I mean, every community is going to end up there. It's just no options. You don't want to pay for the insurance, but you have to.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Get a cemetery deed if you wait.
Oh, you could have saved it. You're going to have two more. Okay.
He's been looking forward to making that walk.
Stretch your legs. We have 2 cemetery deeds.
Yes, a second cemetery deed was given to me today, just so you guys know.
Thing is, it hasn't broke yet, so it's like, well, yeah, that would put it on her if the water would break, but it hasn't broken. She's getting pretty serious. See, that's pretty serious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a contraction. Let's see, we'll switch around the other side, maybe we can see. Oh, yeah, that's it. Yeah, we're gonna have a bubble here, so that's it. I'm safe. Sheep, yeah, see, if they're birthed before midnight,
get a tax
it's my
deduction.
wife's. She has to stay up until it's done. If it births after midnight, I have to stay up. It's on me.
So you're cheering it on here, huh?
I certainly am, absolutely. She owes me the other night. She came out and said, "No, I'll do it. You know, no problem. You don't have to come out."
We're straying off the agenda.
I know, and then she jumped right on it. Well, we haven't finished signing. She's gonna carry it down to you. You'll be all set. And end it was like, so she calls me at 9, and she says, well, okay, you won't have to come out again, I'll do the rest of the night. 2:30, can you come out?
Future agenda items. What's coming up? I just had that slip in front of me and I lost it.
So you have, well, on May 2nd, you've got the community health thing that Mike was talking, that Chief Ranzio was talking about.
Is that incorporated into our meeting on May 2nd?
No, you don't have a meeting on May 2nd. That's just a special event. Your next meeting is May 1st. You're going to look at water sewer rates. I'm hoping the Jeffrey Barn will be on there for just general discussion, Class 4 roads, the potential of a nuisance ordinance, and Quarter 1 financials will be on there as well. And we could start, maybe at the next meeting, we could talk about your summer meeting schedule.
You think the STRs will be done?
We may have it back from Jim, yes, and if we do, we certainly will add that as well. Yeah.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to see on future agendas? All right.
So I just had a question. I don't know if this was from before, but I got 2 Julian Quarry notice of violation documents. Was that just?
Those are
left over
old.
From a long time ago?
Those are from a long time ago. Yeah.
Then I have nothing, so I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Good night.
Thank you.